The most interesting thing about the stove is that the stove can be in perfect operation one trip and then totally inoperable the next. This is directly related to the time between trips. Camp fuel is basically gasoline without automotive additives, just white gas. Gasoline does go stale over time. As gasoline gets old and evaporates, it leaves a sticky residue behind. The gas starts smelling like varnish when this happens. Anytime your fuel smells like varnish, it is time to dispose of it properly. Call the local toxic waste number to determine the proper way to dispose of it. This goo clogs up the jet, the tiny hole that regulates how much gas enters the burner. Even longer storage can cause the goo to clog up the fuel line itself. MSR, the company that makes the stove, has addressed both of these issues to some degree. The Whisperlite model uses what is called a shaker jet. This is a weight with a tiny needle that lives inside the jet. As you hike with a stove in your backpack or with any movement, the little weight in the jet travels up and down with a tiny needle pecking at the jet hole. The longer you hike, the more it shakes and the cleaner the jet hole becomes. MSR includes a wrench, which is used primarily to help you clean the fuel system manually. It will help you take apart the jet and manually use the shaker pin to clean out and clear the jet hole of stale gas or impurities, dirt from careless fuel filling. The wrench is also used to grab the supplied fuel line, clean out cable to clear goo and obstructions from the fuel line. Other easy servicing includes pump oiling and fuel line to pump O-ring replacement and tank to pump O-ring or pump tank collar replacements. More complicated servicing will not be included in this video, with parts and directions included in the Expedition service kits as shown previously. You can service the fuel pump, the control valve, O-rings, and the pump check valve. Cautions. Always consult the manual if you're lucky enough to not have lost it and have it with you. You can get copies of the directions from msrgear.com. Remember, you must take note of how things come apart so you can reassemble the pieces later. Have a friend watch if you are not mechanically minded. Make sure that the stove is cold before you start handling it. Working with fuel is dangerous. Always stay away from any ignition sources while working with camp fuel. Work in a safe place where fuel spillage will not be a problem. Always try to avoid spilling fuel. Also, use appropriate containers to catch fuel while testing and cleaning. Properly dispose of all stale fuel and fuel used for testing and cleaning. Keep heat away from all fuel bottles. During pre-trip maintenance, bring fresh camp fuel in MSR bottles filled but never above the fill line. The space above the fill line is needed for safe storage and transport, as well as to allow for room to install the pump into the bottle and required airspace to pump the stove with. Inventory each stove's contents. Replacement parts are available from REI or other MSR dealers. Parts that are included in the annual kit are a storage sack, the stove, the pump assembly, side heat sheet foil, pump oil, the MSR wrench, an O-ring for the fuel line to the pump, an instruction manual. You should always light the stove to prove it is ready, especially if it has not been used for 6 months or more. If you skip testing with the stove before the trip, be sure to do it in the camp before it's dark. For extended trips, consider the Expedition service kit. For post-trip maintenance, remember to inventory contents of each stove so you can get replacement parts before the next trip. If no fuel is entering the stove, the easiest solution and the easiest problem would be that there's a minor block of the jet inside the stove here. Shake the stove up and down until you hear the shaker weight travel back and forth, something like a rattle. You should repeat that 30 times. Then the stove should be clear if it's a problem there. To determine if the problem is with the pump or the fuel line, first make sure that the pump is turned off full righty-tighty or clockwise. Then remove the fuel line from the pump, like that. Pick a safe spot where fuel can be spilled. Open the fuel valve counterclockwise or lefty-loosey slowly until fuel comes out from the hole. If fuel does come out, close the valve fully clockwise. You can now determine that the problem is with the fuel line or the jet. If fuel does not come out, then the problem is with the pump. If you've determined that the problem is with the stove, you need to determine if it is in the fuel line or if it's in the shaker jet, or it's in both. You should first carefully select a work area where it will be hard to lose tiny parts, as there are parts in this stove that are very hard to see. The first step is to remove the fuel line from the pump. Turn the stove upside down. Unscrew the priming cup counterclockwise and remove it, and put it down somewhere safe where it won't get dirty. Carefully note the route of the fuel line passing through the leg when you're reassembling the stove. But what you should do is take out the jet that's connected into the middle of the stove. You should then work the jet out of the leg of the stove so that it's free from the stove. Once it's like this, replace the jet upside down back into the stove where it came from. Take care not to bend the fuel line during this process, as it will make reassembly more difficult. Again, remember where the fuel line will pass through the leg when you reassemble the stove. Now that you've replaced the jet upside down inside the stove, take the MSR wrench and use the hexagonal shape and place it on top of the jet. You should then start unscrewing counterclockwise until the jet is loose. You can then take it out. This is the jet. You can remove that. Be careful not to bend the fuel line as you break it loose. Once you unscrew the jet slowly and carefully, note the orientation of the shaker weight and pin when you remove the jet, and do not lose it. Here's the shaker weight and pin. It's extremely small, and if you pay attention closely, there's a very small needle in there that's the point of the whole shaker jet. Hold the jet up then to the light. There's a small hole in the middle, and you should be able to see through it. If you point it up into the sun, you should be able to see a speck of light, a circle of light. If blocked or partially blocked, if it's not a perfect circle, remember to clean the jet after the next steps. Put the shaker weight, jet, and primer cup in a safe place. Connect the fuel line to the pump. Pick a safe spot where fuel may be spilled. Open the fuel valve counterclockwise or lefty-loosey, like that. If gas comes out freely, the fuel line is clear. If fuel does not come out, you have a blocked fuel line. Close the pump valve fully clockwise. Remove the fuel line from the pump. If the fuel line is blocked, you need to clean it out. To do that, you need to take the cleaning cable and move it through the pump line to clean it out. To do that, you take the MSR wrench and you take the smallest hole on the wrench, this one right here, and you fit it onto the cleaning cable like that. You then twist the clean cable enough so that you have a good grip with the wrench on the clean cable, and you pull it out about 5 inches. Then you push it back in, and you repeat these steps like 20 times. You should then retest the fuel line again with the pump. If that doesn't work, then do it again. If that still doesn't work, then remove the clean cable completely and clean it out with wrench oil, and then try again. Wipe it clean. You should be able to get fuel to flow properly without having to be tempted to leave out the cleaning cable. That is a bad idea because you might forget to clean the cable and put it back for the next time. If the jet is clean, reassemble the stove. If not, proceed to the next section. If the jet is blocked, take the shaker weights pin and insert it carefully into the shaker jet hole. Make sure you line it up well so you do not bend or break the shaker pin. Repeat several times and then hold the jet up to the light and retest. Reassemble the stove. To correct fuel leaks, you should first know that fuel leaks usually come from 3 locations. The fuel line to the tank leak. These are easy to fix as the stove has an extra O-ring for this. The pump to the fuel bottle. Annual kits have O-rings, old or new collars, or the control valve. And there's an O-ring in the annual or the expedition kits to solve these problems. To solve those problems in the fuel line to the pump leak, usually this is a failure of the O-ring. The O-ring is included with the stove, and 2 are included in both the annual and the expedition kits. These are the steps to replace the fuel line to pump O-ring. Make sure you have a red O-ring at first. Extend the pump shaft half of its length so you can see the arrow marked A or 1 and it's touching the pump shaft collar here, this red shape right here. Then twist the pump shaft in the direction of arrow marked B or 2, 1/8 of a turn to release the collar, like that. Pull the pump shaft and collar completely out of the body of the pump. Put it away for safekeeping. Now use the MSR wrench and take this corner of it and take it to this space right here, this red space right here, the fuel line to pump collar counter, and turn it counterclockwise, like that. And then take it out. Remove the collar and put it in a safe place. Use the end of the fuel line to remove the red O-ring in the fuel line hole in the pump body. Like that. You should take out the O-ring like this. Then replace this O-ring with the new O-ring, still using the fuel line, to push the O-ring back into its position. Like that. Now you undo the steps that you've done. So you take the collar and you replace it and use the MSR wrench to tighten it into position. Then you take the pump shaft and collar and replace it in the same way you first took it out. So you put it down and push in this collar and then turn it 1/8 turn counterclockwise. It should be aligned. The 2 holes on both sides of the pump should have that little red shape inside of it. That way you'll know that the pump is secured. That is the conclusion of BSA Troop 566's tutorial on the backpacking stove. Thank you for watching, and I hope you pass on this information that you've learned to other Boy Scouts and other people you know. Thank you. Goodbye.